Welcome to the Cardboard Crashcast. My name's Ethan, your host. I'm here with Christos, Adam, and Shah. Say hi.
Hello. Hey,
what's up?
We're here with Season 2, Episode 2. This is going to be Board Games for Beginners. We've got an interesting way of going about it this time because Christos and Adam are going to be interviewing the two of us over on this side of the table. Shah and I have a little bit more background information on board games. What would you say, 1 out of 10? What's your engagement with board game community as a whole?
That's a difficult one. I'm gonna give myself above average, so we'll say 7. But there are some niche board game places I definitely have not delved into.
Okay, I'd say I'm maybe a 8. I feel like that's fair. I feel like once you get a YouTube channel, you kind of get that extra point. What would you say you are, Adam?
Ooh, I don't know. I definitely, when I talk to people and say board games, they're throwing out, Monopoly and Sorry and stuff, and I'm like, no, not that. I don't even know how to describe it, because I'm it's not hipster, it's not I guess it's just new age, just modern, different, random kind of designs, and a lot of them have come from you, primarily you. So I'd say maybe I'm at that 4 or 5 range, that middle ground where I feel like those classic board games like Monopoly, Sorry, Clue, and stuff like that. Then that's probably a 1 or 2 if that's kind of how we're doing the scale. Then yeah, maybe in that 4 range. I don't want to overstate it, I guess.
Okay.
I feel really similar to Adam. I kind of feel like I'm a 3, maybe a 4. Just because
maybe I overstated myself. Maybe I'm a 7 then, not an 8.
I'd go down to 6.
Yeah.
I just think that me personally, I just feel like most of my knowledge of tabletop games comes from I've never played Warhammer, but I've seen it played and I've talked to people that played it. I've played a lot of card games.
Let me tell you,
but
you're not missing out on much.
that might be a hot take. I'll be honest.
You have money.
That's true. That's true. I love the Warhammer world, but that's a whole different topic. But I wanted to say this just as we get started. The whole reason that we kind of talked about this, or I brought this up in the first place as an idea for the podcast, is because I know where I stand in terms of my level of intelligence in terms of board games and stuff of that nature. And I kind of know that Adam is relatively newer like me. But then every time I sit down and play a game against you two, I'm okay, so they are just a cut above the rest, and you guys just get it. You guys are good and quick to understand the rules and how to play the game in the most efficient way almost immediately, and then you just kind of fine tune. Whereas me, we all have different play styles and stuff and what have you, but I think that this is kind of a good starting point for a conversation to from your perspectives, what do you think is a good starting point for a player that's coming from a Monopoly, like Adam said, or a Trouble, Sorry, Clue, those types of games that are more common in family households?
Mousetrap.
Oh my gosh.
Mousetrap is a hoot. I love Mousetrap.
I've never played it.
It's great.
I'm trying to think. Yeah. Would you literally just roll and then you get the cheese and then someone gets the...
You have to build a Rube Goldberg machine in order for the other mice to get trapped instead of you.
Yeah.
It's a dexterity, it's actually kind of neat.
Interesting.
I have to answer your question with a question, then I'll pass it to you. Is this person coming in by themselves, or do they already have a pre-established group of people? Do they have to find people to play with, or do they have a family that's all interested in picking up something all for them?
I think that's actually kind of a 2-part answer. I think that just in my experience, and maybe you can expand on it, I think that there's games for families, but there's also games for play groups, and they're not necessarily the same. You know what I mean? So the first part answer is family, and the second part answer is yes, they have a play group. So give me one or one, both, whatever you want.
I'll give you the family one, and you can give the nerdy play group one.
Sure.
Family, I want to say a game that doesn't overwhelm you, doesn't have too many options at any one given time. I almost want to even say that Camel Up is step 2. We need to hit step 1 before we hit Camel Up levels of step 2. So
interesting.
Because Camel Up, that's the first thing that I go to, and people understand horse betting, and in this case camel betting. They get that outside of the board game world. Still, if you think about it, there's quite a few things that you could be doing. You could be betting on the run, you could be betting on the race as a whole, you can be trying to modify the rolls of these camels. On top of that, you have to be figuring out, okay, well, there's 5 dice, there's 6 camels, how many dice are going to be rolled by the time, there's there is a decent amount of cognitive load there, especially for a new player. So I want to say something where you really only have like one choice at a time. I want to honestly say Exploding Kittens, or you could even do like, no. Exploding Kittens or Codenames.
Yeah, no, I would agree. That's like really good.
For family, Exploding Kittens or Codenames, because Exploding Kittens is really kind of like this low stakes. People understand inherently player elimination. There's no point system in that game, so it's either you win or you lose. Like, you don't end the game with like, oh, I got 6 points, the other person got 10 points, so I did something, but I didn't win. No, there's none of that. It's like you die or you win the game. So that sort of ease of like involvement with the win system, and then you really only have like one thing you have to do on your turn, and that's not die. All the things in your hand are just like ways to assist that. It's kind of railroady, and it's not my favorite game, but I do think that it's really good at teaching people like different kind of card effects and like stepping stones into like something more gradual. What would you say for like a nerdy group?
Yeah, for a nerdy group, there's a couple of different things that you can nerd out about that kind of choose which game you want to go into. I know we were talking about earlier how we really like Villainous. So if your play group or just people in general are like Disney fans,
that's a good one.
Yeah, so if they're Disney fans, they can get into this game. It is a little bit more complex, but the cool part about it is you only really have to focus on your own play. There are some stuff that does interact with other players, but for the most part, you're just focused on your own plan and how you win. So that kind of takes a little bit of the thinking away from it, but there's still some interaction with the Fate deck there. I
want to boost Villainous up. I kind of want to say that might be like a step 2.
Yeah, no, for sure.
But Villainous for sure. Actually, this could go for families as well. So the way Villainous works is you have your own realm and you have a specific goal to yourself. And it's completely asymmetrical. So like my goal as Captain Hook could just be defeat Peter Pan at the Jolly Roger. Whereas somebody else could be playing Prince John, which is that greedy fox or whatever, greedy lion from the Robin Hood, and it's just collect 10 points is his goal. Yeah. So like you don't have to worry about what the other person's doing at all. You just have to worry about yourself. And the way you interact is not like random at all. You have a specific deck that helps you, and you also have a fate deck that hurts you. And what happens is whenever the other person triggers a fate event, they take a card from your fate deck and play it against you. So it's like a self-contained puzzle. So nothing.
There's a strategy there.
Nothing can happen that isn't like pre-planned by the game, because your fate deck is the only thing that can hurt you.
You kind of got me thinking now, because I split the answers up, so it's like family versus like friend group or whatever. But there is obviously overlap, but I think inherently when it comes to a play group that you have, like a friend group, I feel like the competitiveness is generally higher. Like people generally want to win more. Whereas like in a family setting, like it's kind of like about coming together as a family and experiencing something together. You don't want anybody to leave like unhappy, that like, so to speak. I mean, every family's different. Maybe every family, maybe your family listener is like super cutthroat and they like throw fists into the yard afterward. Like that's great, but whatever, you do what you want. But I was thinking to myself, kind of earlier we were talking about Dominion. How Dominion was like one of the first like deck building games, right? Would you say like Dominion's on like that level of like introductory level, or would you say it's even still a step up?
I definitely think it is a step up, just because deck building games are slightly more complicated. It's not extremely complicated, but I have played Dominion with my family, and it was a little bit of thinking for them, because they haven't played other like card games as well, so they understand like, the discard pile shuffling back in once they needed it.
Mhm.
And it's just simple stuff like that might be a little bit difficult for a beginner player.
And not just that, like, even if they do grasp the basic mechanics of the game, you want to be able to introduce a game to a group of people where they'll get the goal from the beginning. And that's exactly why a lot of like game designers put the goal of the game as the very first thing in the rule book, because it's been shown that you have to explain the goal of the game if you want the like explanation of the rules to go well. You have to explain the goal of the game within the first like 10 to 15 seconds of teaching the rules to somebody. If you miss out on that and you start going into you can do this and you can do that and you can do this, but you don't tell them like, oh, this is an elimination game, or this is a game about points, or you want to have the most money to win. I always try to say the goal at the very beginning, and that goes into just like new player game theory, where it's like you have to understand what you're striving towards before you can understand the steps to get there. So even if they can like grasp that, like, okay, I need to reshuffle the discard pile, I need to do this, I need to do that, you have to understand like overall you want the points in your deck, but the points hurt you early and the points help later. So like that whole just overarching dynamic has to be understood first.
You know, I know we're big on food analogies here, so I'm just gonna go and throw it out. Another one. It's like making a dish without understanding what the dish is supposed to be, and like you're just kind of like if you read a recipe without knowing you're making spaghetti and meatballs like right off the get go, and you're like, why am I boiling pasta? Like, why do I need tomato paste? Like, what's going on? Of course, you can make the dissertation if you're well experienced in cooking. But if you never cooked before, like, what is going on? What am I doing? Why am I doing this thing? But if you know off the jump, I'm making this, makes it a lot easier to digest and a lot more friendly to like kind of approach as a game.
Mm-hmm.
I did want to follow up with kind of like a second part to what I asked, and what type of game do you guys think is like the easiest for a newer player to like that's coming from like I said like a Monopoly or what have you? The reason I brought up Dominion was because I think it's very easily digestible, but that's your guys' point. Not always. There is a lot of layers to it.
Before you answer what type of game should be, I want to answer what type of game should not be. I don't think it's mainstream enough to introduce a cooperative game early on.
Okay.
I think people really do sit down and they're like, okay, I'm playing a board game to win, right?
Yeah,
and
that's pretty traditional.
Yeah, that's very traditional. I don't think there's very many, if at all, like very classic Americano or like classic European, like the Cluedo and the everything. I don't think there's many that are cooperative that I can think of at all. The most mainstream one came out in the last decade. Really got like traction in the last decade and is finally on store shelves. Like Pandemic is pretty mainstream now, but even then it's like you have to, that's like okay, now you're into board games, okay, now let's learn Pandemic sort of the situation. Next stepping stone. Right. So I think you definitely want to keep it to competitive games. But what type of like genre do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure how to explain the genre, but most games that are pretty mainstream have like a limited amount of pieces and like a pretty simple board that's like recognizable. And one of the games that I think is really good for newer players is actually Ticket to Ride.
Oh my gosh! I should have said Ticket to Ride is like my intro.
It is so
it's
good.
So classic.
It is like the board is just depending on which version you're playing, of course, but the original I think is just the United States, and it's just there's rail lines, and the goal of the game is you create rail lines, you get points for how big your rail line is, and you have certain cities you want to connect with your rail lines. It's extremely simple. The way you do it is just like colored train cars, and it's very limited pieces, very iconic board. And
I think there's like 5 colors and a wild to keep track of.
Yep.
And other than that, it's like it's extremely easy. People
Sounds fun.
people often say Catan is like an opening game. I disagree with that. Although Catan is the best-selling board game outside of those like top like 3 Hasbro games. But Catan's longest road system is Ticket to Ride. Like that's Ticket to Ride. That is just the whole thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm kind of mad that we've never played it before. I went like, I went like right to TI basically. I like skipped like all these things.
What that you've never played Ticket to Ride?
Yeah, I never played Ticket to Ride.
I've never played it either. So I guess I don't
next
know.
time we'll play.
I'm almost thinking in my head because I've been thinking this game and I wanted to ask what your guys' thoughts on it is because I'm thinking of the classic games and the games that I played when I was younger with like my family. I'm also thinking of other games like Life and Payday, and just a lot of these games, like you said, Shaw, is just like a recognizable board. And I'm always thinking there's almost like a random element. There's always rolling dice or spinning a wheel or something. So it's like you take your turn by starting off doing one thing, you move, and then maybe you like get a couple like game pieces to like have in your play area. And then like you score at the end. Like that's what I see as like simple. One game in particular that I'm thinking about that seems kind of like that would be like Carcassonne. I feel like that's a pretty simple one where it's like you just need to get points, you're flipping over tiles and you're just building long like areas, and then I guess you can say it gets kind of complex because you want to start thinking into the future and like where you can put your meeples and whatnot.
The beginner rules for Carcassonne don't even include the farmers.
Oh, they don't?
No, I introduced those to you because like we're not new players.
And it's
but
so,
it suggests you don't even play with the farmers.
It's so crazy because it's one of those things where I'm just so comfortable with it now. And I feel like I was before, or maybe it's because I've played other video games or and whatnot. So like things just are more intuitive to me. But it's really hard for me to kind of like take that step back and be like, what would be difficult for a new player? Because I was like, oh, Clank would be great. You know, you move and they get like a game piece, but then you guys said deck building, and I'm like, yeah, I guess it can be complicated for someone to like do the discard pile. Now they have to pay attention to like
you could take
multiple abilities at once, and I'm like,
the thing about Clank is it's basically 3 game systems running at the same time. So it's the dice bag, which there's games that build dice bags, which is the Clank bag. There's deck building games.
But the dice bag is random. It's not like, I guess you can just be like, I want as little Clank as possible.
Right. So that's kind of like simple, but then you've got the deck building aspect and you've got the board aspect. If you just want to play like the board exploration into the dungeon aspect, you could play like Lost Ruins of Arnak. You could play like even like a betrayal type system. Like I'm just trying to think of like exploration into the wilderness. It's kind of like 3 different game systems like competing against each other. It's running in a really fluid way, but like the fact that the deck building makes your character move, it's like 2 like very different balancing aspects.
I just wanted to interject. The reason I started this whole conversation to begin with is because I was talking to my brother-in-law about like finding another hobby for him, because he works a corporate job. He's like, I need to find a hobby. I need to like make new friends and stuff like that. So like I want to go out and like do things, but he doesn't want to quite commit to a TCG like Magic or Pokemon or anything like that. But he wants to be able to not, and he definitely doesn't want to buy like Warhammer armies, so like where's a happy middle? And I kind of explained to him like a deck building game, and he's like, "That sounds overwhelming," because he's like one of those people that's like the most complex game he's played is probably like one of those the classics, right? The Clue, the Monopoly, like we've been saying.
Trouble.
And you know what? When we play it, he goes hard. I'm not gonna lie, he gets really into it. But I was like thinking to myself like, what is a good game to introduce to him that wouldn't like completely overwhelm a player and like discourage them from playing other board games? Because as we all know, board games are like really fun when you're playing them with the right people and you feel engaged.
Right, and when you don't get a bad taste in your mouth the first time, it can lead you into like a path of spending thousands of dollars on cardboard.
Yeah, that's right, and maybe making like a whole YouTube channel about it.
An episode is coming out soon about Monopoly leaves a bad taste in beginner players' mouths. I don't think we all share that sentiment, but
we'll see.
Yeah. Anyway, you have to also remember that we live in North America.
Yeah.
Ticket to Ride and a couple other games like close to that genre, those are very popular in Europe. Like Ticket to Ride is on every shelf, like how the Game of Life is like on every shelf over here.
I feel like when I was in Germany, I saw it at the game store I went to.
Yeah, it's very, very popular. Catan has been popular for longer over there. It's just a lot of board game design originated in that area, especially in Germany. There's a lot of popular designers constantly coming out with new ideas from Germany, from Denmark, from Switzerland. It's a really popular area for it. Not to say that North America doesn't have I have great ideas, but anyway, what's
I wanted a kind of a follow up to what we were talking about. So, do you guys think that games were you said that cooperative games are pretty much off the table for new players? Do you think?
I would say for step one for sure.
So you think that would you have them continue to play like more like sprint to the finish or competitive types of games, or would you want them to play a game where like they are playing a character like in Villainous, where they kind of like you play toward their character's strength and kind of learn how to build this engine that is their character or what have you?
Mm-hmm. So what you call those kinds of games where it's just like a race to the finish, like very out of touch with the theme of the game, is just like an abstract strategy game.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're talking about like Azul, I don't know if you've played Azul. I believe Adam has.
Yeah.
Okay, Shah has too. Azul is like a very abstract strategy. Like, yeah, it has like a loose theme to it, where you're like building a tile wall, but you're not taking control of a specific character. You're just kind of you, and you're doing things to the board. You're not like, it doesn't want you to imagine yourself down on the board being that thing.
Being a tile.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I think people are generally more comfortable with that, but I don't think it's too big of a leap to jump into something like character driven or like very, very heavy, like dripping with theme.
I think stuff like that is definitely easier to sell. Stuff like Azul where there's no like heavy theme. It's just like, hey, this is the game. We're making a wall.
Oh, it's pretty too.
It is pretty, and I think it was going to be one of my like step 2 games, like for like a decent play group if you got it, because it is very simple, but there is a lot of like strategy you do have to kind of like think about with it. It's a great one though. It's
kind of like adjacent to. Have you played Arboretum?
No, but I've seen that one.
Okay, so Arboretum is like it's very similar to a lot of games that you'd find out of a like an actual deck of cards. So it's a single deck of cards, and you have to build sets of trees like in a certain order, and it's like the same tree of like 1 through 8, and it doesn't matter like the position as long as they're all adjacent to each other, but then different like tree paths can like cross each other, and you're basically just building up this like very abstract board of like very specific numbered trees in order to make the most beautiful arboretum. But the fact that it comes out of just a single deck of cards is probably more healthy to new players, since there's not like a million pieces moving around the board at all times.
Yeah, I feel like the more daunting the task, the more discouraged a player was going to be. So I'm actually curious to ask Adam this question. I know I was like initially going to interview you two, but I kind of want to hear your perspective as well, because I still think that I'm the newbie here, just generally speaking. So they've said their piece about like what they would recommend as for a first time game to like level up from, like the traditional games that we talked about. Now, you as being somebody that Ethan has basically fostered into like this board game lifestyle, what is one of the games that Ethan has like kind of been like, we should play this, that really like made you open up to like the idea of playing more board games?
Well, because your background is a little bit, it came later in life for you, like being interested in things.
For the board games, I mean, I played maybe some board games with family, like I had said before. Then I played like a lot of video games, so I feel like going to board games, it's not as complex. So I feel like I do pick up on things pretty quickly. And then I was also like getting into Magic as well and learning all of that. So I feel like that is one of those things where it's like I can understand Magic. I'm like, I think I can understand other like deck building games and whatnot. I know Clank was one of the big ones that I really enjoyed. I thought it was simple, but that was my first like deck building experience where it's like you're adding cards. I played Twilight Imperium early on, so that was complicated. Now I didn't play it right. We didn't play it right the first time, and we had a lot to learn. So it was kind of like tough love in terms of a lot of my learning, where it's like, okay, I have like really complex stuff, and then I was doing my analysis paralysis and like taking long terms, but I've progressively gotten better just the more I've played them. But I'd say that would turn maybe a lot of people off, or they'd be like, this is too much, but I was always like down for the challenge.
Yeah, I think
he stood at the end of the pool, and I just pushed him into the deep end.
Yeah, like kind of raised by wolves type of thing. Right?
Yeah,
I think it's interesting you said that, because like I feel like it's kind of going back to what I was saying about getting discouraged, and that's either like empowering or like really discouraging for a new player. And what you did, it was kind of like you turned that like, oh my god, what's going on? Like I need, like you're kind of like overwhelmed into like a passion project to kind of learn more about these board games and get better at them and kind of like make it something that you care about. And that's how I think that you've continued to play TI with Ethan every time that you guys can, etc. And obviously delve into Magic and what have you. But I think that's very interesting that there's because I think that your background coming from video games definitely helped you kind of like continue to climb that mountain to level up as a board game player.
I think another thing is like that's probably not the standard, right? There's people who play casual board games. Like if I wanted to go to like my mom or something and be like, hey, is a board game, like it needs to like make sense. So I think Azul would probably be a good one because it doesn't have like a strict theme to it, and it just is like a little bit of a progression of like there's like a one extra mechanic you have to pay attention to. And I know Ethan has introduced tons of board games to his family and friends. And that's kind of leaked into me because I've tried to introduce some to other people. So I'm almost curious. I know I've asked about some of these because I literally inquired with you, like, hey, are these good to recommend to people or play like with some people? But my cousin had gotten married, and he said he does like board game nights and stuff with like his now wife and like his wife's family. And I remember getting them Happy Little Dinosaurs for like a gift. I think that was probably a good one. I got like the expansions as well, so they could probably play it and then move into the expansions because they also both loved dinosaurs, so I thought it was like perfect. But then I got Isle of Cats, which I haven't played yet, and I can't remember if you said that was like a really good one or not. I feel like you said it was like decent.
Yeah, it's really good. So it's a polyomino game, which means like it's the different shapes of pieces and stuff, and you want to fit them onto your like area as best you can, and you can't go like outside of the borders. But you basically have to like draft these cats and then fit them onto your ship because like this person that's like coming to murder all the cats or something or
sure, yeah,
is coming
looming danger
is coming to the island, and you have to like save as many stray cats as possible onto your pirate ship. And it's a lot of fun. It's just they definitely should play Happy Little Dinosaurs before like moving into like a little bit more because there's a drafting system in it. You played it?
No, not that one.
It's a draft. There's a drafting element to it, and then there's that polyomino element, and then there's also like a hand management and resource management and.
But I think they were the type of people that would definitely not be discouraged, right?
Yeah.
Where they're like, well, this game looks complicated, but then they'd be like, this is going to be like the fun thing that we get to do together to learn how to play this game and then keep playing it. Yeah.
I kind of want to talk about the opposite of that now that you bring that up. So like there are people that are like very open to learning those board games. Like they're already like, oh yeah, I would love to learn a board game. You know, that type of attitude. But how do you get somebody that's like so like, man, I don't want to go past Monopoly, man. Like I'm good. Like how do you get them to get over the hump to come and like play what in Azul or what have you, or a zombie dice even, or you know.
Can you get drinks involved?
I don't know. I feel like that would take like depending on the person, they're either like, let's get the hell out of here and go to like a bar and keep drinking, you know. Yeah. But in terms of like getting them to play like a board game, it really, unless you're playing like shots or something.
Yeah, something that I was just thinking about while we were sitting here is we haven't necessarily brought it up, but is definitely a factor when it comes to people like that who are less who don't want to really take that extra step to play something like that is the time commitment for a game. So games that are like extremely quick, like One Night Ultimate Werewolf, Coup,
Flux.
Those are kind of card games in terms, but like same genre board game. Sure, those are really good for people who don't want to take that extra step. It's like, hey, just play this with me. It'll take literally like 10-15 minutes maximum. And then if you don't like it, you never have to play it again.
And that's another reason why I brought up Exploding Kittens. Because lately we play with all the expansions and it takes forever. But it's not supposed to take that much. You're supposed to cut it out to like a third of the deck, and it's supposed to be 20 minutes, like max. So that is a good like time commitment. Hey, we can get this done in a third of an hour. Like it's super easy. Another thing on top of the time commitment that I'll jump off of is setup and takedown. Like if it takes forever for a person to set up the game, the people who don't care in the first place are going to get so disinterested by the time you've actually set up. But if you're like, hey, let's play Exploding Kittens, and you pass out 3 cards, shuffle the rest of the deck, and put it in the middle of the table, like, okay, boom. Like, we're already doing this, you know?
Yeah, it's like, oh, this is like Uno. That's what I'm sure what they would think, right?
Well, I'm glad that you kind of said that, because what I'm thinking right now is the way that I would try to get someone to try something new is to try and compare it to a traditional kind of board game, right?
Okay.
So I'm thinking like, because I know some people that think chess is too much, but let's just say someone like, I like chess because they're like, I like strategy, but they haven't like gone into like all these different games.
Sure.
They'd be like, oh, do you like chess? And I played The Great Plains with Ethan, and it was like, he kind of always described it as like a chess-like game, right? Where you're just like moving pieces, and it's fun. So you can kind of compare it to that and be like, you like chess? Like, okay, well, here's another strategy-like game, but with like some different pieces, a small board, and then like they're like, oh, this is fun, and then I feel like, oh yeah, now I could like play another they can understand strategy in a slightly different context, and now they're like in a completely different board game, and they have like the different look and everything, and now they can like branch out.
It takes that click. You have to baby somebody, because there's so many people out there, and I've experienced them, where they're opposed to playing, not because they have this predisposition to hate it, but because they're just worried it's not going to be for them, or they're worried that it's going to disappoint them. Like it's going to be a waste of their time, or no, I've already played those kinds of games. I don't need to learn something new. And that's okay. Like I totally get it. 100%. There's plenty of hobbies out there that I'm a little bit, I don't know, worrisome or a little bit hesitant to try. But you have to get that click where instead of just being like, okay, chess is the only game that does this, you have to realize there are elements in that game that can be stripped away and placed in other areas. Like Great Plains is a great example. A lot of people say, well, chess is the only of its kind, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like people who would just like, I don't know, they've gone to Oberweis and they played chess on the Oberweis tables like once every 5 years.
That's
or
always
something.
fun.
Yeah.
That always is fun.
But they're like, they think chess is the only game that has that sort of like area control, like movement, with all the different like pieces and their different abilities. But then you play a different game and you're like, oh wait, there can be a different game that's differently designed that does something similar. Like I'm starting to understand that there aren't walls around this. It's like you can break the walls and there you can have different designs.
Something that I was thinking about when I brought up Uno, and kind of when you talked about like having like the game to compare it to.
Mm-hmm.
What was that game that we played that was like Firework or whatever?
Oh, Hanabi.
I feel like that's like the opposite of Uno almost. You know what I mean? And of course, that's like a very...
That was pretty fun.
It was fun.
That's the kind of game, sometimes a gimmick is all it takes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sometimes literally a gimmick is all it takes to get new people in. So Hanabi is a cooperative game. Kind of like...
Oh my God,
you
it's
played
so fun.
the Mind or the game?
That's the one where you can't talk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But instead of you not being able to talk, in Hanabi, you have your cards out in front of you, but they're facing the other way.
Oh, okay.
So everybody else knows what you have, and they have to help you play the right things. But if you play the wrong thing, then you like lose a life for the team.
Oh, interesting.
So you're the
it's
only
a
one
super
who
quick
doesn't
game as well.
know what you're playing.
I would actually say it could probably go as long as some Uno games, but it could also be as short as some Uno games too, which I think that would be a really good game to like, if like everyone loves Uno. Like I haven't met like a single person that's like, oh dude, Uno's not for me. Like I really, very rarely, maybe not Ethan. Maybe Ethan is in the minority here, but the
I didn't say anything.
Uno, I just feel like is like a really commonly known game, and it's really easy to get. If I have an Uno deck, I'm like, hey, do you want to play a quick game of Uno while we like wait for like the card to heat up or something? Like people typically say yes. I feel like Hanabi, I could probably be like, okay, so we played Uno a ton. Like, want to give this a shot? We might need a little more time for it though. And I feel like there was the reluctancy kind of gets stripped away because you have like Adam was saying, that direct comparison to be like, no, we're just playing Uno, man. Like this isn't, we're not playing like some 3D chess game here, okay? Like, you know, which is I think definitely where the reluctancy comes from, because it's like, again, it's like this daunting thing. They look at it like it's like a mountain to climb. It's like, bro, I don't have time to climb that thing.
Like I've played some games now where I look at maybe the closest comparison to like a traditional board game, and I'm like, those just seem so like uninteresting and just like bland. I'm just like, this has so much more flavor and spice to it. And I mean, obviously, I'm more personally interested in like at least putting a little more thought. But even a game like we played tonight, right, where we're playing Modern Art, that's just super fun, right? Like Christos and I probably weren't like counting people's money and like paying attention as much, but I was having so much fun. And like then you get into games where it's like there's a deep level of strategy, but that is not even remotely required to have fun in the game.
Modern Art is a great balance where you can have just like stupid fun and not feel like you're wasting your time, but at the same time you can really, really pay attention and get something out of it. And I don't feel, it's like one of the only games where like if everybody else at the table was screwing around and not trying to win and I was trying to win, I would still feel accomplished. Like I'd be like, okay, I'm outsmarting these idiots. You know? Like, it's not even like I'm screwing them over with my like pre-game knowledge. It's just like, no, I'm better than them.
I want to ask something that I'm not sure if we want to leave it for a different episode, but do you want, I guess, how do I phrase this? What do you think is the most engaging games that you can offer to somebody to like kind of like, especially to a new player, like get their attention and hold it? You know what I mean? Because a lot of games, I feel like, unfortunately, in my eyes, if I tried to like get my family to play Modern Art, they would check out after like the first round, because it's not an easy game for them to like stay committed to, because it's like there's rounds to it. We have to go through this whole thing, and I'm sure like I could even hear my dad right now. He'd be like, all right, I won this round, I'm good. You know, like literally.
That's why I say play elimination is probably easiest to step into. It's because it's not round based, it's not point based. It's literally just like you're here until you die or you get voted out or whatever it is.
I also think team games are really good in that aspect. Like Codenames is the one that comes to mind best, because it's like if one person's checked out, then your teammates get mad at you. It's like, hey, pay attention. You might like think of the right thing for this here, and like it's other people kind of just like, hey, it's their competitive spirit. They're like, hey, I want our team to win. Come on, let's focus.
I know someone. He's my uncle. He says he's played at least one game of Codenames every day over the past 10 years, because he gets up in the morning and it's his first thing he does with his cup of coffee is get online, and he plays with his 3 friends doing the exact same thing. Codenames every day.
No way. That's so interesting.
Like,
dude, that's a lifestyle for
Codenames
sure.
is like that, just that game where like you can get it done quick. It's elimination, and the fact that like one team is going to pick up the spy or going to get enough points to win or whatever. You got to have a quick, just easy to digest, easy to set up, easy to take down, probably team game, probably competitive game.
Could be either. I would say it just depends on the objective.
Mm-hmm.
But generally, we want to go quick with a new player. We want to make sure that like we keep their like we got a split second, right? Mm-hmm. And that shooting star is gonna swing by, and it's honestly, I think it's really tough to. Once you lose a new player, like as their attention or
Mhm.
whatever, or once they're discouraged even slightly, it's really hard to pick them back up.
And also the person learning, if you're teaching a very brand new player, the person teaching has to know the game by heart. If this is their first foray into, okay, fine, I'll try board games, you have to know it.
Yeah, very infrequently do I see you like, maybe you'll open up the box and be like, okay, let me like read
Refresher.
through. Yeah, you get a refresher, so like people are still talking, but you're not usually like reading through the like instructions
Right.
when you're reading it out to everyone. You're like, you just start saying it, and like that makes everyone like me be like, oh, okay, Ethan knows exactly what's going on. Like he's gonna say it, and then if we have questions, we can talk. And I feel that like social dynamic also gets people really invested in the game, because if it's a game where it's like from the beginning you need to be thinking.
Mm-hmm.
There's just no way that's gonna capture anyone. It's just like you said.
Yeah. I mean,
simple.
now at this point, if like I really wanted to play a game I've never played before, I think you'd be down to like let me figure it out and let me like read it through. But that wasn't the case the first time. Like,
you know, this is so not like completely off topic, but a game that we've only played once that I feel like we should definitely play again with more people. And I'm actually wondering what you think this game would be considered. A Dice Force, was it? Where you like create your own die?
Dice Forge.
Dice Forge. That was fun, and we just played the two of us.
Yeah, how it works is the die faces are modular. So
Oh.
so you're rolling dice, and it's like this Greek pantheon style game where you're like getting blessings from the gods and stuff, and they'll like bless you, so they'll change your like worst. It's like instead of deck building, it's
Your
dice
die
building.
Dude, it's fun. It's fun.
Okay.
So they'll
That's
change
interesting.
so you'll trash your worst die face in favor
Sure.
for something slightly better, and then the next time you
But
roll,
you're not guaranteed to get it because it's a roll of the die.
exactly.
That's interesting.
And then you like move around the board, and it's important like where you move to, and you can like block kind of certain areas for people off. We should play with more people, because that was the last game I remember that you like opened up, and like we were like playing it as we were kind of like you were reading through the instructions, and we
Yeah.
were like asking questions and going through it together. But that was a fun experience as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we've kind of got our conclusion. Easy to digest, and code names. I think
And
that
Exploding
It's a
Kittens.
great one.
Yeah.
code names and Exploding Kittens.
sure.
Yeah, both like $10 to $15 games too. Definitely not hard to pick up. If this is like your first foray, or like you need to teach like your mom how to play because you're bored as hell or something, definitely pick it up. So around the holidays, those two are great.
So, and I know we're trying to wrap it up here, but then I want to throw this one last one. So those are both kind of like card games, I guess, still technically. What would be like the simplest, like as close to traditional board game that you can think of that you would be like, that's not maybe like even tile based, it's just like a board game?
Ticket to Ride.
Ticket to Ride.
Let's
for
take it
sure.
to ride. That's
Absolutely.
Right. Okay, yeah.
Ticket to Ride.
Yeah, get that for your kids. They have a Ticket to Ride Junior, and honestly, I played Ticket to Ride Junior with like these kids that I was watching. It is like marginally easier. Like they take one tiny little aspect and make it easier, but for the most part, Ticket to Ride is like kid friendly.
And then you can just tree branch from Ticket to Ride and be like, see, that's not so bad. And then you play a game kind of like Ticket to Ride, but now has like one extra step.
Yeah.
And then you take that game and
Well, literally just pick up like Ticket to Ride Europe. That's like the same thing with one extra step.
yeah, and then boom,
And
there's
then you
the
make them play
stepping stone.
TI in an 8-player game.
Yes, yeah. Well, thank you very much for listening, everybody. I want to thank our basically sponsors, our patrons. If you want to help out on the Patreon, go ahead and check out cardboardcrashcourse.com. Music for this episode was made by Ryan Jacobson, as always, and our editing is done by Star. Let's put something up on screen or sound effect or something, Star. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. Stay tuned for the next episode. You can let us know what you'd like to see in the comments below. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.